Hello there and welcome back to the Asian Athletic, and we just had another round of Asian Champions League Elite games, and we're going to go ahead and review every single one of them. Starting off, Al-Wahda 3, Al-Duhail 1. I think something that I want to start off by doing before we get into the game itself is talk about the form of these two teams going into it, because it's going to illustrate a very important picture that will help you understand why the game went the way it did, basically. In Gameweek 2, Al-Wahda drew 0-0 with Tractor. Al-Duhail, on the other hand, drew 2-2 with Al-Ahli. These two teams drawing in Gameweek 2 is where the similarities end, because for Al-Duhail, they lost 4-0 to Al-Arabi in the Kings Cup, which is a team who are sort of bottom of the table, and then they also lost 4-0 to Al-Gharafa in the Qatar Cup. These two fixtures coming into run-up of this game. Meanwhile, Al-Wahda haven't lost a competitive game of football since January 31st. Couldn't have got a bigger contrast, to be honest. Totally different. And as a result, Al-Duhail went into this game looking really lethargic. They couldn't really get much together. They had the majority of the possession by a massive margin, but when they had the ball, they looked really flat. Didn't have a lot of creativity. I thought the midfield was particularly poor. The pivot of Marco Verratti and Buriram, it didn't look particularly convincing to me. The first half, it wasn't too bad. The opening goal by Piatek was well worked, and it was a very tidy finish, but everything after that just didn't seem right. And as much as I could criticize Al-Duhail, what I really should be doing is praising Al-Wahda, because they played some really good football. The penalty that was conceded by Al-Duhail was hilarious. I think that those fouls in the box where a defender is pulling someone's shirt, they're the worst type, because when you do that, you are compensating for the fact that you are defensively in the completely wrong position, or that physically you are not able to catch up with the attacker. What that foul reveals to us is that Al-Duhail tactically aren't set up well to counter Al-Wahda. They conceded that penalty, they scored the penalty, and then they scored another goal right before half-time. And for me, that goal right before half-time basically confirmed that Al-Duhail are way out of this game. And yet, you go into the second half and it doesn't really feel like much has changed. Diarra's goal was amazing. Great pass from, I think, Tadic, I believe, from Dusan Tadic. And an even better touch from Diarra, who composed himself really well to have a shot, which didn't go in. But then it's the bit afterwards that really amazed me, is he managed to take a touch to take it round the keeper, who was diving back towards him, towards the byline, gets it around him, it's only 2 touches, and smashes it into the back of the net. Desmus, just don't get up, son. Just stay down. You slid off the pitch. If you know what's good for you, just stay down. It's not even the best goal of the game, though, because the bicycle kick from Zuhir was incredible. There's been some really, really great goals this season in the Asian Champions League Elite, and this was a really great game to watch. Al-Shorta 1, Al-Ittihad 4. World record for the number of goals that weren't goals. The number of nearly goals was ridiculous. I mean, Mendy hit it off the bar. Al-Hamdi hit it off the back post, but like the inside of the back post, it bounced in and then curled out. It was like one of those weird football challenges you see on TikTok. And then Mawas, there was like a P-roller and it hit the post as well. Al-Ittihad came into this game and they looked a little bit worrying, I'm going to be honest. Obviously, they sacked Laurent Blanc not that long ago, and they only really had one game under Conceição, who's the new manager, to prep for this fixture. And in that one game that they had before this game was against Al Fire, and they drew 1-1, so really not good. In the Champions League so far, I've actually been a big fan of Al-Shorta. I think they've been playing some really good football. Considering that they very much are the underdogs in nearly every fixture that they have, they play pretty well, and I've been really impressed by them, specifically the performances of somebody like Mawas. I found them to be really fun to watch, and I really enjoy the fact that a team this small is just slugging it out with all these giant Saudi and Qatari teams, basically. So when Al-Ittihad were having these issues before the game started, I mean, I don't know how many other people were, but at least for me, I thought there's a chance that they might get something from this, and they went ahead and scored first. I really started to believe something could really happen here, but it wasn't to be, because Al-Ittihad's squad just did its magic. It's an incredibly good squad. I feel like what happened is that because Conceição is still a new manager, he hasn't fully got his tactics across the team, and I reckon the team just went out, played as well as they could, essentially. It's a well-worked goal for Diaby, but Fabinho's free kick was ridiculous. That was incredible. I'd say Al-Shorta probably unlucky to not get at least a draw. The scoreline, again, I don't think it fully reflects the performances of both of these teams. But I said that about Al-Shorta last time. And really, there's only so many times that I can say, oh, they're unlucky not to get a point. There's only so many times I can say that before you just have to accept they're not good enough for this tournament. Anyway, Al-Ittihad played well, and Diaby had an unreal game. He was one of the best performers this week. Sharjah 0, Tractor 5. So Tractor have finally kicked on. They've had a bit of a slow start to the season, and the last few games they've not had the best of times. They haven't lost in the last 7 matches, which sounds like a really impressive record, but the majority of those games have been draws, and the majority of them have actually been goalless draws, because in the last 3 games, Tractor hasn't scored a goal. Obviously, they have completely broken that curse because they went ahead and scored 5 against Sharjah. This week hasn't been too great for goalkeeping performances, and this is the first example of that. Bin Habib had a terrible game for Sharjah. That second goal, I think, there's no excuses for spilling that. That should be under your control, especially when it's travelling directly at you and very slowly. Some of Tractor's goals were really nice to see. I think all of them were really well put together, and there were some nice finishes there as well. The build-up play was something really nice to see, and it's good to see Tractor kicking on, because I think a lot of the Asian Champions League West is dominated by Saudi Arabian teams, and Iran is a country that has shown throughout history it is a footballing powerhouse. These domestic teams, they can do well in continental competitions, and because Tractor had quite a slow start, I was worried that this might be another poor year for Iranian football. This performance has shown that, well, there's definitely something good in there. That being said, though, I don't know how much credit I should give to Tractor versus Sharjah being terrible, because defensively, this may be one of the worst performances that we've seen this season in the Champions League. It was genuinely that poor. And unfortunately, our favourite player, Adel Tarat, couldn't make a difference in this game. Al-Ahli 4, Al-Gharafa 0. And we go from one extreme to another. This fixture was very different from the other ones before it started, because I think a lot of people saw this coming up and thought that this would be an incredibly even game. I don't think anybody predicted that to be a 4-0 type of game. Al-Gharafa were only 1 point behind Al-Ahli in the table, but if we look at the form, the table just doesn't matter. Al-Gharafa, after they beat Al-Shorta in Gameweek 2, went ahead and lost 2 games in a row, including a 3-0 loss to Al-Sailia. If we focus on the goals, that first goal from Enzo Milo was wonderful. Really amazing goal. The goals this season, like I said earlier, have been amazing. That second goal was also ridiculous. It's a great pass from Goncalves and a good header from Kessie. The only thing is that the defending was absolutely dreadful. And I think the 2 players that suffered the most were definitely Al-Oy and Al-Ganehi. They really struggled on that right flank. They were getting absolutely ruined by Riyad Mahrez, and you had Kessie as well. Usually he's that sort of number 8 style player, and he would maraud up the pitch. He's almost playing as a bit of a striker. You'd see Ivan Toney sort of pull backwards a little bit, and he'd sort of linger on the edge of the box. I think a lot of English football fans are used to Toney being this sort of complete forward, bullying his way in the box, but really, in this game, that role went down to Kessie, and he did a fantastic job at it. And it was just way too much for some of these players to handle. As I said, Al-Oy and Al-Ganehi, they really struggled this game. Also, someone who struggled was Gunnarsson. He couldn't keep up with the pace of Edouard, and he definitely couldn't keep up with the pace of Kessie, and that's how we scored 2 goals, Kessie. After half-time, nothing seemed to change. If anything, Al-Gharafa looked even more vulnerable. They gave Al-Ahli so much space, and as a result, so much time. Sano and Zhang, the 2 centre-backs, they just kept backing off and backing off and backing off and backing off. I said this about Al-Gharafa in the last video. When they played against Al-Shorta, yes, they won, but the football they played didn't look very good, and they were very wasteful in front of goal. And I said that if they came up against a better team, then they'll get punished. And that's exactly what happened in this game. Melbourne City 2, Buriram 1. One of the more dramatic games of this week. Last time, I remember I absolutely slated Aurelio Vidmar for some of his game management. This time, I've got to put my hands up, and I've got to say that he managed the game really well. It doesn't get much better than this. The first half, I'll be honest, was It was terrible. It was actually really bad. The substitutions that Vidmar made were perfect. They got on there, they did their job, they made the difference. They came, smash and grab, got that 2-1 victory. Rashani obviously got on the score sheet, so did Caputo, and a lot of that was because of the substitutions coming on. They didn't come on too late. They came on around the 60th minute. That's a really good time to make your substitutions, and they really shook up that Buriram defence. And this is when I've got to criticise Osmar Loss. The substitutions he made, they were fine. I think player for player, those are the exact same substitutions that I think most managers would make. It's just the timing was really, really bad. They all came when there was 10 minutes to go or when there was injury time left. When you're holding on to a 1-0 lead, because in the second half, it was mainly Melbourne City in possession. When you only have a 1-0 lead and you still have 20-30 minutes to go and you are under pressure all the time, as Melbourne City were doing, you are properly locked in. You are absolutely locked in. This is just the way I see things, by the way. You're absolutely locked in. And if suddenly out of nowhere there is a stoppage because a player has to come off and there's only 5 more minutes, 10 more minutes left to play, I think that actually breaks your focus. I'm really not a fan of it when managers do substitutions so late. For example, I think Sandy Walsh came on in the 80th minute. I don't think that was particularly good for the midfield or the fullbacks. I think that must have messed with their psyche a little bit. If he came on just 10 minutes earlier, Sandy Walsh himself probably could have made a way better positive contribution to the game. But ultimately, because he came on so late, he couldn't really do anything. The game was almost essentially over at that point. Conceding a goal that late in that fashion is really poor. But from Melbourne's perspective, it gets them their first points of this campaign and it gives them a real morale boost in a team that seriously needs it. Chengdu Rongcheng 0, Johor 2. Now, let me just address the elephant in the room. I'm going to not talk about any of the off-the-pitch scandals. This is going to be just about the football and what's happening on the pitch. If you want to talk about the Malaysian fraud and the scams and the Filipinos and everything like that, please go watch my other 2 videos about that. But this is going to be just about the football. Let's talk about Chengdu. Really, really disappointing. I've got a really big soft spot for Chengdu, and this game showed their inexperience with continental football. They were really, really poor in the first half. I think that midfield pivot of Chow and Gan, it's usually so reliable and it's so effective, and Chow especially, it's so versatile. You know, for Chinese football, it's incredibly modern, it's incredibly progressive, but that midfield pivot of just those two just wasn't enough, and they looked incredibly out of pace when pitted up against Johor's attack. They didn't look like they had the pace to keep up with Ayman, and Mendes and Faisal, unfortunately for Chengdu, had really good games. Johor would basically flood that midfield with every single player that they had. Chengdu just constantly look outnumbered when they were out of possession. All the fullbacks would forward inside, they'd cut inside, and the wingers, strikers and midfielders, they'd all push up at the same time. The transition from Johor was really, really fast, and it was really, really good, especially from Arribas, who I don't believe is actually a left back. He's usually a left winger or a left midfielder, and they put him in the left wing back position, and the way he was able to cut inside, cause havoc in the midfield, or sometimes you stay out wide, sometimes even come all the way forwards like a striker. Johor were all over Chengdu in that second half. Goals themselves were really good, by the way. The finish from Arribas to open the scoring early, by the way, which just shows the sort of shock and awe tactics that Johor were deploying that game. It's a really great goal from Mendes as well, by the way. What this was a demonstration of Chengdu's inexperience and a bit of naivety as well. Ulsan 1, Sanfrecce, Hiroshima 0. What is wrong with this team? What are they even about? What are they doing? How do they win? What is wrong with them? Sanfrecce just couldn't break through that Ulsan defence, and I'll tell you why. It's very simple. Because Ulsan had about 100 men behind the ball at all times. We always make fun of Diego Simeone and Mikel Arteta for the haram ball, the terrorism ball. People, Ulsan are playing beyond terrorism. It's like planet destroying Death Star level football. It's despicable, and it works. That's called parking the bus. Honestly, kind of hilarious. I mean, that's the only way that Ulsan can play when you have a team that genuinely can't do anything else. They've just sacked their manager. I mean, I don't know what kind of football I would play with a team as disjointed and all over the place as Ulsan. And you know what? The fact that they grinded out 1-0 victory, I've got nothing but respect for that. Shanghai Port 0, Machida Zelvia 2. Shanghai Port have been one of the least interesting teams in the Champions League so far. For some reason, I don't know, maybe that's a bad habit, but I always have fairly high expectations for these Chinese sides because of how explosively they play in the Chinese Super League. It's always very attacking oriented, but Shanghai this game was anything but that. It's actually Machida's first ever Champions League win. It's their debut appearance in the Asian Champions League. They got 2 draws in their first 2 games, so I think getting a win over Shanghai Port must have felt really, really good. And, you know, just for that, I'm really happy for them. The defending from Shanghai was really poor, though. That own goal from Fu obviously was shocking. He literally had his back to the attacker. That's like defending 101. He's facing the wrong way. Sommer's goal was good as well, but the deflection from Wei definitely helped. And I'm going to be honest, I reckon if it wasn't for Wei Chen, the goalkeeper, I think Machida could have won by 5 goals possibly. Machida would not give up the pressure. They were constantly piling on Shanghai, and Wei Chen pulled out some really, really good saves. Overall though, it's a deserved win for Machida Zelvia, who finally get their first ever win in the Asian Champions League. Al-Ahli 4, Nasaf 1. Now, I need some help here. If anybody here is from Uzbekistan or is an expert of Uzbek football, I need your help right now, because when they announced the lineups and I saw the lineups for Nasaf, I was incredibly confused. All of the players who played really well in Gameweek 2 were not playing, specifically Nemetov and Sidikov. I don't know what was happening here. I know there's some fans of Nasaf who are unhappy with the management of the team, but I need to know why Nemetov, who I assume is your best goalkeeper because he was very good in Game Week 2, was on the bench, and Sidikov only came on as a substitute. I'm going to assume that there were probably injury issues, but if not, something's got to change because the team that came out today was terrible. Look, I understand that Nasaf is easily probably the biggest underdog in this tournament, but that performance, there's a difference between being an underdog and just being bad, especially because we've seen Nasaf play 2 other games this season and they looked good in those 2 other games. So yeah, what happened, guys? Well, actually, I do know what happened. They've lost their last 6 matches in a row. Yeah, that explains everything. But, you know, even when they lost in Game Week 2 and they got absolutely pumped by Al-Hilal, you know, Nemetov still put in a good performance. The Sidikov goal, I gave a lot of praise for in my last video, and I think deservedly so, because Nasaf, they played some good football. This game, though, they played absolutely terribly, and Vorobey, the goalkeeper, may as well have not been there. Really disappointed with Nasaf, and I really hope that the reason why Nemetov and Sidikov were on the bench was purely because of injury or fitness concerns. Once again, any calls out there to Uzbek football fans who might be watching this video, I need someone to explain what happened with Nasaf. Al-Hilal 3, Al-Sad 1. Once again, Milinkovic-Savic had another unreal game. Let's start off with Koulibaly's goal. It's a great finish into the corner of the net. The way he floored Guillaume is honestly kind of hilarious. Why on earth is he man-marking Koulibaly? I have no idea. Also, in that same goal, what is the goalkeeper doing? Just watch it on replay. It's just really bizarre. And speaking of bizarre, what did Darwin Nunez do to his hair? What is that? In all seriousness, Al-Hilal are absolutely dominating the Champions League so far. I don't think that's too surprising, but I didn't think that they would beat Al-Sad in this fashion, in the sense that they absolutely demolished them. Milinkovic-Savic just destroying games, Ruben Neves helping alongside him, and Akram Afif was kept quiet the whole game. He was completely anonymous, all whilst Al-Hamdan had a fantastic game. Koulibaly did an amazing job at keeping Al-Sad out of this game. Firmino couldn't really do much. Guillaume as well couldn't really do much there either. And again, another solid performance from Al-Hilal. In other words, water is wet. Gangwon 4, Vissel Kobe 3. Vissel Kobe came into this without conceding a single goal this campaign, and as you can probably figure out, it's a bad time to be a goalkeeper because this was another poor goalkeeping performance for Vissel Kobe. This time, Gonda, who is normally so solid, this guy's quality, and he had a pretty poor game. Gonda, you've got to save that second goal. It's like he was moving in slow motion. I don't really know what he's doing. I think I'm expecting better from you, especially because I know that you're a good goalkeeper. Great Great finish from Miyashiro though. His impact was incredible after coming off the bench. But yeah, this was a proper seesaw game, proper rock and roll style football. It was really, really entertaining from start to finish. I think for me, this was my favourite game of the week. There's something hilarious about K-League sides doing well in Asia. I don't know, they just never seem to deserve it. I watch a fair amount of Korean football and it's terrible. So when they come to continental tournaments and they do well, I just sort of think, well, you probably didn't deserve that. But this is probably one of the first times where I think, yeah, you know what, they actually deserve that win. Shanghai Shenhua 2, Seoul 0. Alright, so last time I criticised Leonid Slutsky a fair amount, but this time I've got nothing bad to say. He set up the team really well, and it was a proper smash and grab type game from Shanghai Shenhua. I think Leonid Slutsky prepared perfectly for this game because he came into this and he played a 4-3-1-2 formation. So he doesn't have any wingers. I mean, he has Asue, who's a winger, but you played him as a striker. And then essentially he had 3 defensive midfielders, Gao, Li, and Wu. And they basically spent the entire game choking out Jesse Lingard. And they did a really good job at doing that. Seoul could never fully get into the rhythm of the game, or at the very least they couldn't have long periods of sort of sustained creativity and sustained attacking threat. Now, this isn't really related to the game that much, but Xu Qinghao might be the weirdest goalkeeper that I've ever seen. Why does he move like that? Where did he learn to move like that in his own net? And why does he save like that? It's so strange. I mean, it works. It's just really bizarre. I love it. That's why we love Chinese football. Even from just the first half, it was pretty clear that Shanghai Shenhua's main strategy was essentially just funneling the ball down the right wing to Asue. It happened throughout the first half, and I thought maybe second half, Seoul will identify what was a very obvious strategy and try and contain him, but nothing seemed to change and they got punished for it. Asue obviously scored. A lot of people might criticize Lingard in this game. Actually, I think Lingard did very well, especially considering the fact that I do believe that Leonid Slutsky set up his team to constrict Lingard specifically. He still played pretty well. He managed to wriggle himself free from many of these defenders and set up loads of chances for his teammates, but he just got let down by them. Duganjic, Rodriguez, Moon, they just couldn't finish any of these chances. Lingard did a pretty good job. He worked really hard, and you know what, if your strikers can't score, there's nothing you can do about it. Overall, it was a good game, as we all expected from these two big teams. Thanks for watching the video. What did you think about my opinions and reviews about these games? Do you think I was too harsh? Do you think I was too generous? Who do you think will come on top out of both of these groups? If you're interested in keeping up to date with Asian football, make sure you follow our Instagram. You can find the link in our description. There you can find all sorts of cool posts and mood boards that will be sent straight to your feed. And if you're interested in submitting an idea for a video, make sure you comment that down below, or keep checking out the community feed on YouTube and be sure to reply to any post that I put out there. And occasionally I do put a poll out there too, and that's important as well. Thanks for watching. As always, see you later.